Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Hopefully everyone else is gonna be able to join without too many problems. Again, my name is Cooley. I'm the Education Outreach Director for the Department of Business Oversight, and welcome to the CalMoneySmart webinar for Thursday, June 4th. We have a lot of things to cover, so let's just get right into it. So, things that we'll cover on this webinar, we're going to do a quick overview of the CalMoneySmart grant program, and then we're going to run over the expected timeline and also the deadlines. We'll definitely spend the vast majority of this webinar on the FAQ section, and also have a open floor discussion where you could submit your questions. So you'll note that and I please ask you to please keep yourself muted until we get to the open floor discussion section. Um, you could use Zoom's chat function to submit your, let me see if I can pull this up here. You can use Zoom's chat function to submit your questions, and then we'll go ahead and discuss those in the open floor discussion section, okay? So let's do a quick overview of the CalMoneySmart grant program. It was created by Senate Bill 455, and here's a link to it. By the way, I'm going to provide these slides. It'll be uploaded to the CalMoneySmart web page. So I'm shooting for Friday, but I would say Monday at the latest, we'll have a recording of this webinar as well as these slides available on our website. So the legislation grant has given DBO the ability to award grants of up to $100,000 per applicant. The maximum total amount of grant money allowed to be awarded every year is $1 million. So our fiscal year begins on July 1st and it ends the next year on July 30th. And to be eligible for a grant, you have to be a nonprofit organization. And one of the great resources that we're using to analyze grant proposals is the FDIC's National Survey of Unbanked and Underbanked Households report. It was released in 2017. It's got a lot of really good demographic data. It talks about the definition of unbanked and underbanked. So I highly recommend you go check it out. Okay. So CalMoneySmart grant uses, the legislation allows or actually creates 3 different categories for using grant money. Now, I'm not going to read this verbatim because this actually comes direct from the legislation. Instead, what I'm going to do is kind of summarize it for you. And then, this language is available on the grant application as well as the website and then also the legislation. So the first category that grant funding is allowed to be used for is to create financial education and empowerment content for unbanked and underbanked consumers. The next category is to create some kind of financial coaching or training for those consumers. And the last category, which grant funding is allowed to be used for, is to create a financial product or service to help unbanked and underbanked consumers. We've had a lot of questions, mostly specific questions about what proposals would fall into which category, and also whether certain individuals are asking whether they should do more than one category, right? 1 or 2 or all 3 different categories. We recommend you just do one category, mostly because of the limited funding and also the limited implementation time. We highly recommend just choosing a category and going with that. And also in terms of, in terms of whether your proposal falls into one of these categories, if you're really interested, or if it's kind of offshoot somewhere, feel free to always email us your questions at our email address, calmoneysmart@dbo.ca.gov, and then we can kind of fine tune it or ask our legal counsel whether your program would fall into one of these categories. Okay. And also additional program requirements are listed on the application as well as our website. So here's our estimated timeline and deadlines. We launched the program on May 19th. July 3rd is the deadline to submit your grant applications. I believe there's a 5 p.m. Pacific time deadline. Um, so anything submitted after July 3rd will not be considered. We're estimating that by August 21st, we'll be able to go through all of the grant applications and select the appropriate, well, the commissioner will select the grant applications he thinks will be best, and we'll notify them by then. And then we're going to give those selected grantees 7 additional days to basically submit these forms. They're just standard state forms. Yeah, they're standard state forms, but they'll get 7 days to sign those forms, and then by September 21st, we'll be able to disperse the grant funding to start the programs. So real quick, we need your feedback. We have this little survey. Here's a link to it. If you get the chance, if you do it right now, or you can do it later, we really need your feedback about our grant program. This survey has basically four questions that's going to help us determine how and where money is going to be spent, and also the general interest we have in the program, whether you're thinking or you're considering applying for the grant. And also, we've had a lot of requests from different programs about sharing each other's contact information. So we're building a separate mailing list to share with individuals who want to share each other's contact information. It's all going to be part of the survey. So if you get the chance, please fill this out when you have the chance. You can also do it right now. Like I said, it's only 4 questions. So let me check the chat really quick to see if we have any. If you do have any particular questions, please put it into the chat, and we can address those in the open discussion. Let's see here. Okay, no questions yet, which is perfectly fine. Okay, so let's just keep moving on. Now we're at the frequently asked questions section. We're going to spend the most time here, and then we'll go into the open discussion, okay? So the first question is, can grant funding be used for incentives? And I believe this means financial incentives. So the answer is no. There are only 3 categories which you could use grant funding for, and financial incentives. So something like, creating some kind of financial incentive for unbanked individuals to open an account, that is not covered. So your proposal would be denied in that sense. Now there are some roundabout ways to do this. Not roundabout, but I would say if you're planning to use funding to buy marketing materials to promote your program, that could be part of your proposal, and that would be fine. But definitely, financial incentives is a big no. Okay. Can funding be used for education training for local small businesses? This is one of the first questions that we received. So yes, as long as the education and training is for unbanked small businesses. It's kind of a fine line, but essentially if you're thinking about creating a program to serve unbanked businesses or underbanked businesses, and whether it's education or training or maybe some kind of product or service or tool, yes, that would actually fall into the category, since the legislation basically says that the 3 different categories will serve unbanked and underbanked communities, which includes small businesses. So there are some more specifics. If you have, please email us and we can try to make that determination if that's what you're thinking about doing. So next question is, are grants reviewed on a rolling first come basis? Okay. So the answer is essentially all grant applications that are submitted to us by the deadline will be reviewed. However, the process goes more like this. First, we review the applications for their eligibility, right? Make sure it has the correct documents, make sure it meets all our requirements, and then we start scoring on the proposal of the grant program. So we score that, and if all the scores are equal, then we start scoring based on the time of submission. So as long as you submit it early and you have a great grant program proposal, then you should be fine. let's see here. Certificates of good standing. So we had a lot of questions about this, and I'm going to try to clarify as best I can. How recent should these certificates be, and where can organizations get these? So, certificates of good standing must be current and within 45 days of our deadline. Um, to be honest, I think we're going to be we're going to give a little leeway on this. But I will say, if you don't have your certificate of good standing yet, you're going to need to get it as soon as possible. Here's a link to the link right here is to the Secretary of State's, it's a form which will request the certificate of good standing. Last I checked, it takes about 2 weeks to get it. So I would highly suggest you submit your form immediately as soon as you can, because it's going to take them some time to process it and then send it to you so that you could submit it back to us by the July 3rd deadline. Please take care of this as soon as possible. Again, we're the general idea is we'd like to have your certificate of good standing within 45 days of our deadline, but I think we're going to be a little lenient, mostly because we didn't provide you with a really long time to submit your applications, right? Question 5, on the grant application in regards to certificate of good standing, which is question 9 and 10, these appear to be the same. Could you provide further clarification? So I could bring up the grant application here, but I'm just going to talk about it really quick. And then we could probably discuss this later if there are more questions about it. Questions 9 and 10 basically refer to the certificate of good standing and the state of origin. So I believe question 9 says you need a certificate of good standing from the state of origin. And also you need question 10 is you need a certificate of good standing from the state of California. Now, this really more pertains to larger nonprofits that let's say like the United Way or maybe like the March of Dimes or some large national nonprofit that wants to apply to our grant, and maybe they have a local chapter that is applying to the grant. So in that instance, they would need to get a certificate of good standing from their state, saying that they're compliant and everything. And then they'll need their local chapter who is going to be implementing their program in the state of California. They'll need a certificate of good standing for the state of California. Obviously, if you're a nonprofit and you're only based in California, then you won't need those two certificates of good standings. You'll just need one for the state of California. So hopefully that kind of answers that question. By the way, I will be posting all of these frequently asked questions to our website. We'll update it, I'm going to say Friday at the very latest. We'll get all of these updated on our website. Okay. This is a big one, and we get a lot of questions about this. And this is on the application as a required document. What documentation to provide proof of? Applicant conducts its activities in a manner that serves public or charitable purposes, and applicant's net earnings benefits does not benefit a private shareholder or individual. Okay, so this is the full legal answer from our legal counsel, but I'm just going to kind of summarize it for you. Okay, so basically every nonprofit should have corporate governance documents and tax exemption documents, right? The first one is part of your corporate governance is kind of articles of incorporation, bylaws, all that kind of basic nonprofit startup documents should basically talk about how you're not how your net earnings are not benefiting individuals or private shareholders. And then essentially a letter from the IRS, it's basically your 501c3 nonprofit status document. So basically essentially the IRS nonprofit 501c3 document, and then your articles of incorporation, bylaws, any kind of business documents you have should satisfy those documentation requirements. And again, if you have very specific questions, you could always email it to us and we'll answer it as best as we can. Okay. Question 7, since grant money will not be dispersed until September 21st, can we implement programs at a later date? The answer is yes. So next year, we plan to start the application process sooner so that we could disperse money by July 1st and kind of match our fiscal year. But obviously, this year is a little bit weird for a lot of different reasons, since we won't be dispersing money till September 21st. Yes, you can implement your programs later, and this is going to be obviously part of your plan proposal. But I would not recommend I wouldn't recommend implementing late this year, because one of the requirements of our grant program is that you submit a report at the end of the year, which is basically detailing how you spent the money and what kind of results you've had. So all that kind of stuff, it's one of the requirements. And so if you don't have anything to report, it doesn't really look good. And then if you wanted to submit an application for next year's grants, it's unlikely that we would approve that application. So yes, you can implement later, but sooner is better. Is the 2-page limit stated on the application page 4 for each question? So yes, we so that we don't get really large applications, we're basically putting a limit of 2 pages per question on the application. So if you've gone through the application, there's a bunch of different questions, and each question we're limiting you to 2 pages of answers. So don't go over that 2 per question. I hope that kind of answers that. And can a nonprofit submit a new application each year to continue their program if awarded? So yes, you can submit an application every year to try to continue funding your program. However, there's no guarantee that we'll approve the grant to continue your program. There's a lot of different factors, and I don't want to try to dive too deep into the nuts and bolts, but essentially every year we're assuming that there's going to be a new pool of grant applicants, and also we're going to base our decision on how the progress of your grant program is going. So let's say you have a grant program, you implemented it, it's going great, you're getting a lot of people, a lot of great feedback, you can provide us with excellent analytics. You're more than welcome to submit another grant application the following year for the next fiscal year of funding. And you could use all the data that you've collected and all the implementation that you've done as kind of proof that you would like more funding to continue the program or to expand your program. And yes, we would love to see that. Here we go. So question, I think that's it. So yes, we are down to submitted questions. So some of you emailed us questions prior to the beginning of this webinar, and we just want to answer those questions really quick before we jump into the submitted the open discussion. Looks like there's a bunch of questions in the chat right now. So let me jump through these real quick. Okay, given the large budget shortfall, what is your best guess about the chance of the funding mixed through budget process? So according to all the leadership individuals I've talked to, funding for the grant money, the CalMoneySmart grants are highly, highly likely. Now, we will definitely update you if anything changes. These things happen. Legislators make last minute decisions. So I wouldn't say it's 100%, but I'd say it's about a 95% confirmation that we'll have funding for this program to get started. But again, we will update. We'll update the website, and then we'll also we have a newsletter that we're going to try to publish every other week, basically providing updates on the CalMoneySmart program. So we'll definitely put updates, and you'll get updates on the status. So assuming you receive more qualified applicants than available funds, what do you expect to be the average grant size? So it really does depend on a lot of different factors, but based on the applications I've seen so far, and we've had 2 application submissions, and based on what I've been told from other programs, I'm estimating between 60,000 to 100,000 for the grant sizes. So it's just, again, based on information I've been given. How many grants do you expect to award, and will grant amounts be reduced? So, based on my estimate, we're likely going to grant 10 to 15 awards, grant awards this year. And no, we will not be reducing grant amounts to try to accommodate for more grants. The commissioner is only he's going to pick his top, I would say he's probably going to rank them in order in his top 10, 15, maybe even 20. And then we're going to try to fund as many as we can until we hit that maximum, that $1 million maximum. And then that's pretty much it. We have no intention of trying to modify or change your grant proposal so that we could try to get more programs approved. It's just we're going to try to get as many funded at what the original ask funding is. Okay, so now we're to the open floor, the open discussion. So please submit your questions through the chat. I'm going to go ahead and start from the very beginning. Please put the link to the study of the unbanked. Oh yes, let me see if I could do that really quick here. So basically the first question is if I could put up the link to the unbanked FDIC's unbanked survey. I think it's right here. Here it is. Okay. So here's a link to the FDIC's national survey of unbanked and underbanked communities. Again, it's a really, there it is. It's a really great report. It's pretty long, but it has a lot of information in there. They break down the demographics as well. So I believe they break it down by county. So if you're creating your grant proposal and you want to use a good reference point for whether your demographics or your county, you could definitely reference this report. And it talks about, I wouldn't say it talks about it, but it basically has a survey of the unbanked population and the demographics. So there's the link to it. And let's go to the next question. Would partnerships be accepted on grant applications? This is a really good question. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take this question down and ask our legal counsel, and then I'll get back to you on it. My initial thought is no, because the grant application is only for one applicant. Now, if part of your proposal is to collaborate with another nonprofit, I think that might be okay, but I don't think we'll be I don't think we'll be splitting the award between different nonprofits, right? So let's just say you're, some local nonprofit and you intend on working with, let's say like a church or something. Both of you are nonprofits, but the application is only for one applicant, when the one applicant is in one nonprofit. So if you're a local nonprofit working with a church, you could put that as part of your program and say that your intention is to collaborate with this church, which has ties to unbanked and underbanked communities. And that will be part of your program. And then we would award you with the money, and how you use that money to help fund the church's initiatives is kind of up to you. Again, it's going to be part of your proposal. But what I'll do is I'll talk to our legal counsel to get an exact answer that question. But what I would say is it is likely that you can't share partnerships on grant applications. Okay, so the next question is, what if the certification of good standing is based in? Okay, so what if the certification of good standing is based in another state? You would have to get a certificate of good standing from that state. So let's say you're a national nonprofit working out of Texas, then basically you would have to get a certificate of good standing from the Secretary of State of Texas. I believe that would be it. And then we need a copy of that. And honestly, it's just a legal requirement for us. We just got to make sure that you're in good standing within your particular state organization as a nonprofit. So that would be it. Again, if you have a local chapter who's going to be applying for the grant, then your local chapter would be the one that would give us like a state of California certificate of good standing. I hope that answers the question. So what is the difference between items 9 and 10? Oh, okay. So we've talked about this already. Again, questions 9 and 10 on the application is about, one for your state of origin and then one for the state of California. If you're a nonprofit that is just in the state of California, you'll just need one certificate of good standing, and that would be just from the state of California. Okay. Can we apply for funding for our organization every year? I think we answered this. Answer is yes, you can apply for funding. There's no guarantee that the funding will be approved. And again, that's because there's a lot of factors going on. The grant pool, the pool of grant applicants is likely to change every year. And also it depends on the results you get from your first year of your program implementation. Okay. Is it 2 pages per question or per section? So that's section D, C, D, and E of the application. So it's 2 pages per question. I've the whole background behind this is because we've talked to other departments that do grant funding, and they highly recommended that you don't allow for a lot of a lot of paperwork, because you're going to get large binders of grant applications. So instead, limit 2 pages per question on for each section. So like section C, I mean, I could bring the application up and we could go this one by one. But if section C has a question, then it's 2 pages for that question, and then the next question you could have 2 pages for that one, right? So each question is allowed a maximum of 2 pages to provide your answers. Does financial education for low income entrepreneurs count for this program, or is it only for consumer financial education? Okay. This goes back to, let me see if I can pull this up real quick. So this goes back to our second question in the FAQs, which is, let's see here, FAQ right here. Nope, it's this one here. Can funding be used for local small businesses? Entrepreneurs is what you're asking. So does financial education for low-income entrepreneurs count for this program? Yes, it would. So entrepreneurs, whether they've launched their business already or they haven't launched their business, if they're in that unbanked and underbanked demographic, right, they would be considered consumers, or they would be considered part of that group of underbanked and unbanked individuals. So you can create financial education to, I guess, or training to highlight why these entrepreneurs should start a bank account or get a bank account or use a bank account for their business or whatever. But yes, entrepreneurs, even if they've launched their business, again, as long as you could basically describe with data, essentially, prove that there is a pretty big population of underbanked entrepreneurs or underbanked businesses or small local businesses, and that your training will be focused on getting them educated on the benefits of getting a bank account or using a bank account. I think that would actually be okay. It would fall into one of those categories. Okay, so next question. Can you put in the chat so we can click on it? Can you put in the chat so we can click on it? Oh, the link. Oh, yes. Sorry. So I think they were asking about the link to the FDIC report. Let's see if I can copy it really quick for you. It's right here. So to make it easier for everybody, let me just see if I can copy this real quick. And I'm going to paste it into the chat for everyone. So here is a link to the FDIC report. Again, great report, really big, but it's not crazy. It's in fact, for me, it's actually quite fascinating because it talks about both the national, state, state, and also I think county, the breakdown by counties. And the FDIC has these reports on their website. So if you want to look for past reports or I think they're working on the 2020 report right now because they do it every 3 years. You could look those up, and you could use it as good points of references for your proposal. Okay, so can we apply as a coalition of several CBOs? I'm guessing that's basically it's a CBO. So can you apply as a coalition? Again, I'm gonna clear this with my legal team, but my I'm anticipating no, based on the application. Yeah, I'm leaning more towards no because the application is geared towards single nonprofit. So if there's a single nonprofit within your coalition that wants to, spearhead the entire thing, and your idea is to collaborate with other nonprofits, and that's going to be part of your proposal, that's perfectly fine as long as we hold one particular nonprofit accountable. They're the ones applying for the grants, and so we're going to be holding them accountable for how the money is being used. And I think that would probably be our legal team's response. But I'm going to take that to them, and then I will bring it back to everyone of a certain answer. Okay. Um, yes, that's what I mean by collaborating with other organizations. Okay, good. If I heard correctly, subcontractors need to be written into the grant proposal. I would highly recommend it, yes. And whether that's subcontractors in terms of collaborators, or whether, let's say you're going to, part of your proposal, let's just say for as an example, part of your proposal, you want to create financial, some kind of web tool, right? But you don't have programmers and you plan to outsource that, right? You're going to hire a programmer of some sort to build some kind of financial web tools for you to, for unbanked and underbanked communities. Yes, you would. I would suggest you have the subcontractor in mind as part of your proposal. If you don't know who you're going to subcontract for, then you could just simply say, you could simply put it down that you're going to subcontract I want to say the web programming for this web tool. And then you have to give an estimate of how much it costs. And then there you're going to have to basically give us justification for your estimate of the cost, right? Again, that's all part of the application and the budgeting that's required for the application. But yes, we prefer you kind of go down to the nitty gritty details. The more detailed, the better, because at the end of the day, you're competing against other nonprofits and their grant proposals. So if you have a really nice, well detailed grant proposal with kind of a step by step and who you're going to bring into your program, um, I think that only helps your case. It's going to help your grant proposal be much better. Um, I don't think things change all the time. So you might submit a grant proposal with, let's say, XYZ programmer, but by the time you get the money or the funding, they might have gone out of business or their agreements have changed. I don't think it's beyond reasonable to change those programmers, right? So long as, or change your subcontractor, so long as the cost is not completely shift or change radically enough that it's going to change the nature of your program that you're implementing. Okay, I hope that answers the question. Um, is there a plan for geographic distribution of funds? So like North Cal, Southern California. So currently there are no specific plans for the distribution of funds. Next year, based on the applications we get this year, the commissioner has already expressed a very big interest in trying to divide how many the grants are distributed per geographic location. But this year, since we don't know, we just don't want to make quotas, right? We don't want to have a quota for how many grants we give down south or how many we put up north, because it's very possible we could get 10, 15 really good grant proposals for SoCal, and one, I want to say, halfway or not incomplete grant proposal for North Cal. and we don't want to just give it to North Cal because they're the only one there, right? But I will say that it is a factor, and that's one of the reasons why we have that survey out there. The commissioner wants to know essentially what are, where are the general interest here, and are we hitting certain regions, right? And if we're not hitting certain regions, he wants to try to expand the marketing for this program, for this grant program out there, to see if we could try to get more applications from those regions. But essentially right now, no, there's no set quotas, and that may change for next year. Again, the commissioner is very interested in trying to, I don't want to say evenly distribute, but at least try to represent the entire state of California in the grant distribution. So if he does get a very good grant, let's say from the Central Valley area, I know that's kind of one of those demographic areas that has a high unbanked and underbanked community. He would definitely hold um, that grant proposal as, he would probably rate it higher than if we get a lot of grant proposals for like SoCal. But SoCal has a very large population too, so I'm not exactly sure how he's going to do it. But one thing will happen is the grant analyst. So we have a couple of people who are going to be analyzing these grants. They will be essentially rating by geographic location as well. So I hope that answers the question. It's a bit of a rabbit hole there. Let's see. Just to make sure, on page 2 per question, technically we have about 17 questions total within all sections combined. So we can write 34 pages to cover section C, D. Okay, yes. So to be clear, there are 17 questions total on the application, 2 pages per question. So a maximum of 34 pages to cover all the questions. Yes, that is correct. That's correct. And that's not counting I believe that's not counting your proposal. Your proposal is, I believe, is going to be a separate attachment. And I don't know if we put a page, I have to go back and look at the application. I don't know if we put a page limit on the proposal. Maybe we did. Maybe that's part of the questions on sections. Is it G or F? I don't know. I'll look back. Okay. Funds cannot be used towards incentives. Correct. Is there anything else that funds cannot be located to, or a preferred distribution of funds towards program? Okay. So the question is, you mentioned that funds cannot be used to support incentives. Is there anything else that funds cannot be allocated to, or a preferred distribution of funds towards programs, staff salaries, admin costs, etc.? Okay. So one of the frequently asked questions that I didn't address here, but it's in the application and it's on the legislation and it's on the website, is administrative costs, right? Admin costs. The legislation specifically states that no more than 15% of the awarded grant could be used towards administrative costs. Now, what is an administrative cost? And this is one thing that we've been tossing around within our organizations, and we asked DGS, which is Department of General Services, for their recommendation. And essentially, DGS has said for administrative costs, it's kind of a weird thing. And again, we put the exact language on the website, but essentially, administrative costs are things that you already have. So for instance, you have computers, you have internet service already, you have, admins there, personnel there. So that'll be all part of your admin costs, but it can't be 100% your admin costs. So for instance, if you're a nonprofit and the only thing you're doing is going to be this grant program, right? You're not doing anything else, then what your 15% could be, up to 15% could be all the admin costs. But according to DGS, Department of General Services, it's likely that you're doing other things, right? So you're already paying for internet service that you're using for other programs, maybe other services that you're providing. your phone costs, personnel costs, all that has to be proportional. All that cost has to be proportional to this particular grant program. It's kind of a weird thing, but I will give you an example of good admin cost, right? Well, not something that is not an admin cost. So let's say you're gonna do like a web tool, right? You're gonna launch a financial web tool for underbanked and unbanked communities. That's your proposal, and you need the domain name, right? You need to buy the domain name, and you need to buy the web address, and you need to buy web hosting or something. That could be part of the cost, not administrative cost, but actually the actual cost to run the program, because that cost itself is dedicated towards this specific uh, grant this grant program, right? For CalMoneySmart, it's purely for the grant program you're proposing. So if you're hiring, I wouldn't say hiring, but if you're subcontracting like a programmer to do some kind of work specifically for this, then that could be considered a cost of the grant program. But if you have an in-house programmer already, and let's say they're going to spend, I don't know, let's say they're going to spend something like 40 hours to develop a tool for you, some of that will have to be considered administrative costs, right? And then some of it could be considered cost for the actual grant itself, right? Not grant, the actual program that you're creating. So it's all part of the budgeting. I would say I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of it. I know it could get pretty granular, but if you have a specific question, like, you're planning to buy 30 laptops or something like that, please email us first before you submit your program proposal, and then I'll run it through my legal team to make sure it's okay. I think let's just say if you're going to buy equipment, I think the issue is, let's say you buy laptops for training or something. The issue is that after your program ends, those laptops could be used for other things that your program is going to run, right? Other training programs. So you couldn't write off the 100% of the cost of the laptops purely for this program, right? Instead, you would have to say, well, we plan to, after this program is launched, I don't know, 50% of it, use it for other programs and whatnot. So again, I'm throwing numbers out there, but if you have very specifics, email us. I'll run it through our legal team, and we'll come back with answers, giving you a green light or red light on your proposal. I hope that answers it. It was kind of a rabbit hole there. So yeah, no financial incentives. I want to say marketing materials is okay. So you're going to make like brochures, or maybe you're going to create like a video of some sort. That's fine. I think that's, let's say you're going to give out swag, some kind of swag. I think that's okay, right? You're going to buy some kind of swag for your program. I think that's okay. It's not financial incentive, but it's promoting your program, which is going to be helping unbanked and underbanked communities. So I think that will be okay. So next question. Regarding training being provided to entrepreneurs, can the training topic be on how to access loan capital to fund their businesses? This is a very specific question, and I will take this question and bring it to my legal team and come back to you with an answer. But from what I understand, I want to say yes. Initially, yes. By the way, if I don't answer these questions, feel free to email us at CalMoneySmart at dbo.ca.gov, and we'll definitely reply back, because I'm getting a lot of questions I got to bring to my legal team. So, in terms of funding for, training to entrepreneurs, how to access loan capital to fund their businesses. As long as the loan capital is bank-based, I want to say, because again, what we're trying to do is educate unbanked and underbanked communities on the benefits of using a bank versus going to take out payday loans or other loans from individuals, like title loans and whatnot. Instead of going that route, what we want to do is we want to try to educate, those entrepreneurs or even unbanked individuals on going to a bank where their money will be secure, and also on the benefits of having a bank account or even getting a loan from a bank, right? So I think in general, yes. Yes, you could include the topic of how to access loan capital from banks, and I think that would be part of your training, and that would be okay. Um, Okay, so looks like we're at the end of the group chat. Again, feel free to please submit more questions to the group chat. I'm willing to, we got about 12 minutes left, so I'm more than happy to answer any more questions while I'm here. And if you do want to just ask your question over the video, feel free to unmute yourself and just ask away.
This is a silly question, but I've been trying to find the actual exact spot to go on the California business website for that certificate of good standing, and I am going around and around. Do you happen to know the exact link to get there?
Oh, yes. So you know what I'm going to do? In the chat, I'll go ahead and in the chat, what I'll do is I'll give you the link. So the certificate of good standing is actually on the Secretary of State's website.
Yeah, no, I'm there, but I keep going around and around trying to find that specific form, and I haven't found it.
Okay, so sorry about that. I believe, let me see if I could pull it up real quick here. Yeah, the Secretary of State's website is not actually the most user-friendly, but I believe this is the form you'll need, and it is basically a certificate right here, and it's essentially a certificate of status, right?
Okay, that answers it. I'm finding certificate of status. I kept trying to find the good standing, but.
Oh, yes. I don't know why they call it certificate of status, but essentially, yeah, basically the certificate of status is going to say good standing, and
All right,
that's what you
perfect. Okay, thank you so much.
Yep, no problem. Are there any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. And remember to please take our feedback survey. Again, it's going to be super helpful for us, not only to let us know kind of the general idea of the distribution of grant funding, where it could go, but also it's going to help us gauge whether you're going to need more time for your grant application, or whether, how many people are going to be applying. And then also, if you want to share your information with all the other nonprofits out there and all the other different groups. We have a pretty big mailing list right now, and like I said, that mailing list is purely for our email newsletter. I'm hoping to send one out next week. It'll have a link to this webinar and also the slides, and also I'll include links to like the survey, the FDIC report, and also the certificate of good standing request form from the Secretary of State. So if there, again, I'm going to stay for a couple more minutes. Please feel free to submit any more questions through chat, or unmute yourself and just ask away. So we got a question here. Can we subgrant to other nonprofits? So no. I could get legal clarification from my legal team, but I'm about 99% positive they're going to say no. I think the intention is not to. So part of the application process is for us to vet the people who, or the nonprofits that are going to be using the money. If you use yourself as someone who's going to subgrant to other nonprofits, then it basically goes around the whole application process, because we're not going to be aware of the nonprofits that you are subgranting to. Um, I would say it's kind of a fine line, and again, it goes into that question of, can you collaborate and co-apply for a grant? I want to say there's only one applicant, and there's one reason. The reason why is because we're going to get audited on how we spend the money, who we distributed money to, and how the money was used through the nonprofits. So, I don't think an application or a proposal to subgrant to other nonprofits would be approved. If you want to collaborate with other nonprofits, I don't want to say you're going to give nonprofits money, but you know, it's a very, very kind of loophole, kind of a bit of a loophole here. I'm not going to dive too deep into it, but the general answer is no. You cannot subgrant to other nonprofits. It could turn into a bit of a rabbit hole. So yeah, I'm just going to say no. But you know what? I think it's a great question, and I will be sure to ask our legal team about this. Are there any other questions? We still have about 7 minutes. So 7 minutes. Make sure if you want to ask a question through the video, you unmute yourself. And then remember, July 3rd, which is a Friday, is our application deadline. So get those applications in. Again, I think it's a 5 o'clock deadline, and you have to submit your application, all attachments and everything through, it's an email address. It's calmoneysmart@dbo.ca.gov. Let me put it into the chat. Yeah, so please get your applications submitted through this email address. It's a really good way that we're able to track all the applications, what time they were submitted. Also, if you have any problems or questions, additional questions after this webinar, submit it through this email address as well, and we'll get back to you. I have a team of, I have a small little team that is all monitoring this this email inbox, so we can answer your questions. We try to be as responsive as we can. If you don't get an answer to your question right away, like within 24 hours, it's probably because we have to go to our legal team to try to get their guidance on. Our legal team are the ones who mainly crafted the application. And so there's a lot of legal jargon and a lot of necessities that they put into there. And so we usually go back to them if we have, very technical questions about the application. Okay, so we have 5 minutes left. Feel free to, again, kind of a last call for questions, put it into the chat or unmute yourself and speak out. Okay, I'm going to wait 1 more minute just in case you're trying to formulate your question. And again, feel free to put it into the chat or, just unmute yourself and say it out loud. Again, if you don't get your question in, feel free to put it up on or email it to us at calmoneysmart@dbo.ca.gov, and we'll be sure to answer it as soon as we can. So 1 more minute, and then we'll just close up the webinar. I want to say first, thank you to everyone who thank you for everyone for your interest and joining us. I think this is a great grant program. I know the commissioner is very excited to do this. This has been on our plate for a while. and it's going to be great seeing all the different grant proposals, everything coming in, and and honestly, if you for some reason if you don't get approved this year, your grant, we have essentially 4 more years of grant funding that's been allocated. Um, and feel free to submit for the next fiscal year as well. As long as you're on our email newsletter, you'll get updates on when we'll start accepting applications for the next fiscal year, which it's really coming right up anyways. And so the whole grant application pool is going to change year to year. So even though you weren't approved this year, you could probably get approved next year. And also you'll get feedback when we announce the grant awardees. If you want feedback about your grant program proposal, and maybe you want to ask questions why it wasn't proposed or wasn't approved, we'll definitely answer those questions for you. So just keep in touch. Let's see here. We do have a question. It's one of my staff members. Since we're in a pandemic, does DBO foresee much of the education being web-based, since many in-person events are still canceled? So this is actually a question that was asked in the last webinar. Basically, can you have your proposals be web-based? And the answer is yes. We absolutely support any kind of online training or program or service, as long as it falls into those 3 categories. So yes, it could be completely online, since especially now doing an like a face-to-face outreach or program is going to be a little more difficult. That's all going to be part of your proposal though. And like I said, the commissioner is more than happy to facilitate, because he understands that under our current condition, doing face-to-face programs or even face-to-face training is going to be a little bit difficult. So yeah, again, that'll be part of your proposals. Okay, so looks like we're right at the close of our webinar. Again, thank you everyone for joining. Please email us questions if you have it, and we look forward to seeing your applications.